In today's video, we're going to be doing a beginner's overview and tutorial of FlutterFlow. And then a little bit later in the video, we're going to be building a fun app just to give you an idea what kind of apps that you can build with FlutterFlow. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps that I build and or demonstrate on this channel are available to view and or clone from my Patreon community. And you're going to see a link to it in the description below. Also, this video is brought to you by Mastering FlutterFlow, which is my comprehensive training that teaches you anything and everything that you need in order to build pretty much any kind of app with FlutterFlow, from very, very simple to very, very advanced. You're going to see a link to it in the description below as well. Now, before we get started, it's important to internalize the overall architecture of how web apps, desktop apps, as well as mobile apps work. After you understand this and internalize this, everything else is going to be a lot easier. All right, so here we have a general diagram of how a lot of these apps are structured and how they work under the hood. Okay, so here we have a user, and this is a person that's interacting with the app. Okay, so we have the UI, which is the only thing that the user sees. Okay, the user does not know how the app is built. They don't know data, nothing like that. They only really see the UI. And really, that's the only thing they really need to see. Okay, so they see the UI, but you can't have an app just with the UI, because if you had an app just with the UI, that would be called a website or a web page. Apps are dynamic. Apps do something in response to what the users seek, in response to what their requirements are. So the next thing we have here is this logic subsystem, okay? And this is the part that's trying to figure out what the user wants in order to kind of give them the data, do a bunch of calculations. Basically, it's a way to give what the user wants, okay? And so a lot of these things here have to do with the screen, have to do with interacting with the screen, have to do with getting the data. In many ways, this is the heart of the app. This logic part is what makes your app essentially an app, okay? If you didn't have this, you wouldn't really have an app, okay? And last but not least, we have the storage subsystem. And this is the part where you're going to be storing data, you're going to be reading data, you're going to be writing data, you're going to be deleting data, you're going to be creating data, things like that. And typically when it comes to app builders such as FlutterFlow, you have a bunch of options at your disposal. The first thing is local state. Okay, this is the simplest way to store data. This is where you can store just a bunch of values, maybe like a string, maybe a number, things like that. Very, very simple values. The next thing that we have here is a more comprehensive storage subsystem. And typically with FlutterFlow, you're going to be using Firebase's FireStoreDB. And we're all going to talk about that in just a minute. But essentially, this is a more comprehensive system. This is a more involved system. You can store lots of different data types there. You can organize it the way you want. And it's very, very scalable. It's very, very fast. It works really, really well. Another way of storing data or getting data or kind of manipulating data is by using an API. An API stands for Application Programming Interface. And unlike these two data types, what you're essentially doing is you're connecting to a third party and interacting with them, right? So you're connecting to another server somewhere out there, and you may ask them, okay, I want this piece of data, or I want to store this piece of data, or I want you to do some logic. Okay, typically with APIs, you might have APIs that only store data. So you're going to be, storing data and retrieving data, but you also have APIs that do logic. Okay, so things like AI stuff, right? You basically tell it, do this for me, or generate this image, or, generate this piece of text, and it returns with whatever you asked for. So this is basically a way to connect to another computer and get them to do something that we either don't want to do ourselves or can't really do ourselves. Okay, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So the most important thing here is to understand this diagram here, is that everything flows through the UI, right? It doesn't start at the data, it doesn't start at the logic. it starts with the user. That's kind of what web apps are, right? Web, mobile, desktop apps, they start with the user, right? They're interacting apps. The user, asks for something. They click somewhere, and then it fires off this flow to the back. It doesn't start from the back. It always starts with the user. Okay, so now that you kind of have an idea of the general, app flow, the general kind of app architecture, let's go ahead and log in into FlutterFlow, and I'm going to briefly show you how all the pieces fit in. From this kind of architecture, how they fit in when it comes to a no-code app builder such as FlutterFlow. Okay, so here I am on FlutterFlow's homepage. I'm going to go ahead and log in. And so I've just logged in. And as you can see, I have lots and lots of apps. And that is because I've been building apps with FlutterFlow for quite a while now. And as a result, I understand what you can do and what you can't do with FlutterFlow. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and create a blank app here. And we're just going to call it, I don't know, test app. We're going to say create blank, and we're going to skip all this for now. All right. So we've just created a blank app screen, and there's lots of things going on. So let me kind of make sense what's happening here. So the first thing that you want to understand is you want to work your way from left to right. Okay, you want to start at the UI. You want to start mapping the functionality that the no-code builder offers you to what you're seeing here. Okay, so if we go back to our app, this part here, these elements, they're actually called widgets, are the UI elements. Okay, and these are the things that the user is going to be interacting with. Now, if you come over here to this widget tree, you can see all the elements, all the stuff that's happening on the screen arranged in this kind of tree hierarchical structure. And this is really nice because if you look at this page here, right, you're not going to have elements all over the place. You might have maybe a container, and that container is going to have something inside of it. Okay, it's not just going to be a container and then text and then this. You're going to have stuff inside of other things. And when you're talking about stuff that's inside, that's typically called children. So you might have a container that has a child being another element, or it has multiple children, stuff like that. And so if you look over here, we can see that right now we don't have many things going on. We have a home page, we have a column, app bar, text, but we have a column. And what that means is that the elements inside of a column are going to be arranged in kind of this vertical fashion. So if I click this and I type text, I have this text, but if I add another text, it's going to be one below the other, okay, because that's a column. Okay. On the other hand, if I create a row, let's say I create a row inside the column and I add a text and I add another text, now they're going to be arranged in kind of this horizontal fashion. And that is because stuff inside a row creates a row, right? So if you have a row and you put stuff inside of it, the row's job is to position those elements horizontally, whereas a column's job is to position those elements vertically. Okay, and you can obviously have a row inside of a column, which means that the row itself is going to be this horizontal piece made up of other children, but the row itself is going to be just another element inside of a column. So I can create another row, and those two rows that are inside the column are going to be arranged in a vertical fashion because they're inside of a column. Okay, so there's lots of things that you can arrange, and obviously you have lots and lots of widgets, right? We have these commonly used elements, layout elements, we have all of these things, but the biggest takeaway here is these are your UI elements, which is kind of what we want to do. We want to kind of work from left to right. We want to see where everything maps together. So we covered the UI briefly. Let's talk about the logic just a little bit, right? So the logic really begins when the user is interacting with the app, right? Right now we have the UI, so nothing is really happening. But if you want to have something happening, you need to head over here and you can create an action. So now, if the user, maybe clicks on an element or clicks on a button, something is going to happen. Your app is going to become interactive, right? So now instead of just having a static piece of app or static pixels, essentially, you're going to have a situation where now it's responding to what you're doing, right? So for instance, I can come over here and I can add a button here, and I can add a button, And typically buttons are interactive, right? Text may not be interactive, right? Most of the time it's not going to be interactive, but buttons are for the most part interactive, right? So I can come over here, I can open this flow editor, and I can create a bunch of actions that will happen in response to this tap event. We can also have a double tap. We can respond on a double tap or on a long press. But typically you're going to be responding on a tab. That's kind of what the user expects when it comes to a button. So we can add an action, and we can do all kinds of things, right? We can write to the database. We can call a number, send email, lots and lots of things that we can do. We can play sound, alert dialogue, show a snack bar. So depending on what you're trying to do, you have lots and lots of options. And if these are not enough, you can create a new action yourself, okay? And so when it comes to this logic area, right, it all begins with this action flow editor, right? So the user is looking at an app and they want to do something with the app. They want to maybe enter their name, or they want to refresh the app and put some new data in. All of that is going to begin when you click on whichever element that you want to respond to, and you attach an action to it, right? So when you click on, let's say, a button, and you click on open, and then you can add an action, and you can create some kind of an event, some kind of a response. And obviously, depending on the widget that you're using, right, you can click on the widget, you can come to this action editor, you can open that up, and you can see you can even attach an action to a text when it's tap, when it's double tap, or a long press. So basically the same actions as a button. Depending on the widget, you might have different actions, as you're going to see in just a little bit. But for the most part, you have a button that has, a tap, double tap, or long press. But the other thing that you can do is you can just create an action when this page is loaded, right? So if you want something to happen without the user actually clicking on something, you want to load some data, or you want to do something while, before the user is actually, talking to the app, you can click on home page, and you can come over here and you can open. And as you can see, you have different ways of attaching actions. So this is a way to get your app to do something without having the user click on anything, right? So as soon as the app loads, we can have an action. So we can display a message, we can send a request to another server, we can do all kinds of interesting things. Another thing that you can do is you can attach an action when the user shakes their phone, because I believe, like with iOS, when you shake your phone, it's like an undo, okay? And so you can attach some kind of an action when the user shakes their phone. But granted, this is not something that you're going to be doing often. But on page load action event is something that definitely has a place, because you can do some very, very useful things when it comes to doing something when the user just loads the app. The next thing I want to talk about is the storage, okay? So you need to get your data somewhere, and you may also need to save data that the user inputs. And so how do you do it? Well, and so like I mentioned in this architectural diagram, there are several ways of storing your data, of retrieving your data. And so let's talk about them one by one. So the first thing I want to cover is when it comes to storing very, very simple values. So if you come over here, you have app state. And so what you can do is you can add a state variable. And what's that going to do is that's going to allow you to store a piece of data. So for instance, we can add a string as a state variable, and I can say, well, string var, right? For variable, I can create it. And now inside of my app, I can access this variable, and I can store all kinds of data in there, and I can retrieve. But the problem with app state is that you can only store very, very simple types. So I can add an integer, right? So I can do integer var here, and I can say, well, this is going to be an integer. And it's the same problem, right? I can only store a number. I can store a string. The other thing that I can do is I can also store these variables on a page level. So app state is across the entire app, meaning that you can access that variable on any page, because you can have multiple pages, not just one page. But this local page state variable is basically the same thing, except it's only going to be accessible on that page. So it's a way of kind of organize your state. It's a way to kind of organize which variables store what kind of data? I mean, do you need to store data that's going to be available and accessible across the entire app, or do you just want to store data that's only going to be accessible on this page? Okay, that's the difference between app state and page state. Now, if you want to store more complex types, something more complex than just like a string or an integer or a double, something, more involved, maybe documents with many fields or collections of documents and things like that, then what you're typically going to be using is you're going to be using Firebase's Firestore DB. And the first thing that you need to do is you need to connect your Firebase account. So if you go into settings and integrations here, you're going to go into Firebase. You need to enter your Firebase project ID. And so if you head over to firebase.google.com, you can create a so-called Firebase project. A Firebase project gives you a lot more than just a place to store data. So as you can see, we have here Firestore database, but we also have a lot of other things, a lot of other interesting features that we can use with our app. And so once you create your project, as you can see, I'm in this project already. You're going to head over to this gear icon here. You're going to go into settings and you're going to copy your project ID. You're going to go back to your app and you're going to paste it. You're going to say connect. You're going to say auto generate config files right here. You're going to wait a little bit. And now, as you can see, it says Firebase setup complete. And what you've just done is connected your database to your app, which means that now you can directly talk to the database that I showed you here inside of this Firebase console. Now, after you connected Firebase to your app, you can head over to this Firebase console here, go to Firestore database, and you can create data here that's going to be available inside of your app, and your app will be able to read that data, it'll be able to modify it and things like that. So I have a bunch of different collections here. Probably if you log in and you have a brand new account, you're not going to have all of this. It's not important really, but one collection I want to show you, and this is going to be something that we're going to be making an app around, is this words collection, right? So if I click on this words, I have this collection. Inside this collection, I have 10 documents, okay? And so on each document, I have 4 fields. So we have English version of the word, we have the Spanish, we have the French, and we have the Portuguese. So I essentially generated 10 words, 10 random words, and I also, for each word, I listed their translations in 3 other languages. Okay, so here we have another one: house, casa, etc., etc. We have apple, and then we have the various translations. And the reason I did that was to show you how this organizational structure works, but also to show you how you can build an app using this functionality. And so if you head back to FlutterFlow, you can click here to Firestore setting, and you can configure the schema, which essentially tells FlutterFlow about the data that you have in your Firestore DB. So I'm going to say add a new collection, and I'm going to say words, and then I'm going to create the schema, meaning the fields. Remember, we had those 4 fields for each word. We're going to start from scratch, and then you want to copy exactly how you have it. So I have en, es, fr, pt, and so I'm going to say en. I'm going to say this is a string. I'm going to say es. This is a string. I'm going to say fr and pt string. Okay. And so now we have a schema inside FlutterFlow, which it means that it can essentially access that data in your Firestore DB, and you'll be able to kind of manipulate this data inside of FlutterFlow because we've defined a schema for it. And that's going to make it easier to kind of work with this data. Okay. All right. So now that I've given you an overview of FlutterFlow, the different pieces, the different subsystems, the UI, logic, as well as the backend, let's quickly build a fun learning app. And that way you can see how you can build a quick app from beginning to end. The app that I had in mind for this video is an app that allows a user to learn foreign words in a very unique and interesting kind of Tinder style format. So the user is going to see a foreign word, and then they're going to have an option to swipe left or swipe right on the English version of that word and to guess if this is the same word that they're seeing. So they're going to see maybe a Spanish version of house, and then they're going to see the English words as cars that they can swipe left and right, and they need to decide if the word that they're seeing in the foreign language is the same word that they're seeing in the card below. And so they need to swipe right if they believe so. If they swipe right and it's not the correct word, they're going to see a message that says wrong. If they swipe right and it is the correct word, they're going to see another message that tells them, congrats, you picked the right word. All right, so let's begin. Let's build this app from beginning to end. So the first thing I want to do is I want to delete all of these little things because we're not going to need that. Let's go ahead and change the title of this window here. We're going to call it word font. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to build this UI. We want to kind of envision how the UI is going to look. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to go into column and we're going to add this swipeable stack. Okay. And this is that Tinder style swipeable stack. You give it some data and then you can swipe left and right with the data that you kind of fed in. The next thing that we want to do is we want to give the swipeable stack a card that's going to display the content, because right now it's just a widget, but we need to give it a card that's going to present the contents inside of the swipeable stack in a certain way. So we can select the swipeable stack, click here. We can pick just a generic widget, but if we click here, we can see some of the widgets that have been built and we can take a look. So we can type card in order to find some kind of a card that we can use. Lots of interesting cards here. And let's see, so maybe how about this one? Okay, so here we have a card. It kind of looks like what we want, but there's a lot of things that we don't want. So what we're gonna do is we can expand this to see the whole thing here, but we can come back here and we can delete all this, because we don't need any images. We don't need the rating. We don't really need description. All we need is this to have the actual word. And there's probably something else we might need. So we have a column. Let me go ahead and wrap this text inside of a row so we can nicely center it. I'm going to center it. That's going to be the word. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now this is going to be the word that's going to display in English, because initially the person is going to see a foreign language word and then they need to match it up to the English level word. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a little bit of spacing from the top, something like this, and let's go ahead and add a image. Okay, so we're not going to add an image on the row level, we're going to add it on the column level. So I'm going to say I want an image, and this image is going to be below, and now we have an image below. Now I want to center this image, so I'm going to wrap it inside of a row, right? We're going to say wrap widget row, and then we're going to center the row. And actually, I want this image to be above. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this row image, we're going to drag it above. And now we have this image. And this image is going to display the flag of the words that we're matching. So the idea here is we're looking at the English level words. So maybe this is going to display a US flag just to show the user that they're matching English level words. Okay. So maybe make it a little bit bigger. Okay, something like this. And now we have a swipeable stack. We haven't given it data yet, but we're going to do that in a second. But first, I want to create another little widget above this that's going to display a foreign language word that the person needs to match to their respective English level word, okay, English language word, okay? So we have the swipeable stack inside of a column. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add another container here. I'm going to drag and drop it right there. And I'm also going to pad it a little bit from the top. And let's go ahead and fix it up. Let's make it wider and height of 100. That's fine. And let's go ahead and make it rounded corners. Really, really nice. Let's go ahead and do maybe 10. Okay, a little bit rounded. We can also do some other styling. We can do box shadow. Okay, that's nice. Kind of like what we have here. Let's go inside this container and add a text. And now we have a text. And let's go ahead and center this text. Let's also center it inside this widget. Okay, that's fine. Okay. And so this is going to be the foreign language word. And then they're going to see all the words that they need to match it up with, okay? And the idea here is I want this foreign language word to be picked randomly. I don't want, to pick the first word all the time or the second. I want it to be picked randomly. And if you come over here, we have 10 words. And so I want this foreign language word on each invocation to be picked at a random fashion, okay? So if the person loads the app, maybe it's going to display flower or, Spanish floor. Or maybe it's going to display manzana, right? So if we come back over here, what we need to do is we need to pick a random word. We need to pick something at a random. And for that, how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we need to load the data, right? We don't have any data. It doesn't matter if we have a random integer. We don't have any data, okay? So what we're going to do first is we're going to attach an action to homepage to do something when the user loads the app. And what we're going to do here is we're going to generate a random number to pick a random word out of our collection, okay? So I'm going to add an action on this homepage level, okay? We're going to add an action, and then we're going to do on-page load, and I'm going to say custom action. I'm going to create a new action. And the only thing this action is going to be doing is going to be returning a value. It's not going to be taking anything in. So we're going to be returning an integer. Okay, and we're going to click here. We're going to generate this action. I'm going to call it gen random integer. Integer is a number. We're going to regenerate this. And now we need to add custom code here. And we can simply go to OpenAI Codex. We can type generate number from 0 to 9. Okay, in computer science, counts start from 0. Okay, so 0 to 9 is the same thing as 1 to 10 when it comes to, you know, the English language, right? When it comes to explaining different counts to humans. 0 to 9, 0 is the first element in the list. 9 is the 10th element, right? So 1 to 10, okay? So we're going to generate a random number from 0 to 9 because we have 10 documents, 10 words. So that's kind of what we need. And it went ahead and generated. We're going to do copy action, yes. And now we created a custom action that's essentially generating a random number from 0 to 9, and then it returns it, right? We have a return value. We're going to say save action. And now when the user first loads the app, we're going to generate a random number from 0 to 9. All right, so now that we have a random number from 0 to 9, let's go ahead and load the data. Let's go ahead and load the words, okay? So what we can do is we can click on homepage as we had before. We can come over here and we can add a backend query, and we're going to do a query collection. We're going to pick words. Remember, we defined the schema for this, so that is why it knows about it. And we're going to do list of documents, and we're going to do confirm. Okay, so now when the user loads the app, we generate a random number, and we also get a list of those words that we have stored in the database. Now, before we can display a random word here, we need to make sure that that random integer that we generated is available throughout the app, okay? And so if you click on homepage and you click on this and you open this flow editor, we need to make sure that we have this action output variable name, and we're going to call it random number. Okay, now that we have it, that random number is going to be available everywhere. And that means we can pick a random word out of our collection. So we're going to click here. We're going to click here to set up a word. We're going to pick words document. We're going to pick item at index. We're going to say specific index. And for value, we want that random integer value. We're going to click here. We're going to go to action outputs. Remember, that's the action that was loaded. And we're going to click on random number. We're going to say confirm. And for the document properties, remember, we're pulling a whole document, but which version? But which translation text do we want to display? Well, here we want to display, let's say, the Spanish version. So we're going to come here. We're going to say yes. We're going to say confirm. Okay, so now when the app is loaded, it picks a random number, then it displays a random word linked to that a random index. And in this case, we're displaying ES. Obviously, you can change it, display maybe the French word or Portuguese word, but I just have ES here. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if this works. We're going to come here. We're going to compile and check our custom widget. So we do have an error. The reason we have an error is because we're using a random function, but we did not import the math library, right? So we need to do Dart math here. And now we should not have an error. So I'm gonna say save, and we're gonna recompile this. I'm gonna say compile code. All right, so now it compiled and we don't have any errors right now. Okay, so that's great. The other thing you want to pay attention to is this number right here. It says project issues. This is not an error. This is actually a warning. So it says Firestore rules are not deployed. We can click here and we can deselect this because this is not private data. And then you can click deploy. You can click on deploy right here. And now we've set up our permissions. We don't have to worry about it too much in this case because this is not private data. Okay, this is just general data. So let's go ahead and run this app just to see if we are seeing a random word from our list. And then we can finish this app. All right, so here's the app. And as you can see, we are seeing a random word here. So if I reload this, we should see another word here being displayed, a different word. Okay, now we're seeing a different word picked at random and displayed here. This part is still static. We still need to fix it out, which we're going to do next. But at least this part is working. So we're going to close this. We're going to come back, and now we need to work on the swiping functionality, okay? So let's go ahead and look at our swiping functionality. And what's going to happen here? Well, what's going to happen is we're going to load the swipeable stack with our words, and then the user will need to swipe. And depending on if they're swiping with the correct translation or not, we're going to display a message. The next thing that we need to do is we need to load up our swipeable stack with the words, okay? So we can click here, and we can load it up with the backend query just like how we did it before, but we already loaded the words, right? So another way of doing it is we can click here and we can generate dynamic children from the existing words that we already loaded, right? So we can click here, pick these words, and then we can just call it items, okay? That way we don't have to do another query for the same data, which is wasteful. Okay, so now the swipeable stack is loaded up with the words, with the items, okay? And now we need to make sure we're displaying the right words. We're going to be displaying the English version. And we also need to make sure that we have the right logic. So I'm going to delete this image for now. We may add it later. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click here to replace it with a dynamic value. We have this items item. We're going to click this, and I'm going to display the English version. Okay, so now we have these cards, and the only thing we're displaying is the English version of a word that we picked out from the list, right? This is going to be in order because we're just getting the list. Okay, so now if we run this app, let's go ahead and run that test environment. We should have one already. Let's go ahead and open it up. We're going to reload it so it sees the new changes that we've implemented. Okay, so now we have a random word called guitarra, and we have guitar, and that actually is the same one. So let's say we can swipe, right? As you can see, we see the cards behind it. So let's say we swipe, then we see the next word. We swipe, we can swipe left, we can swipe right. We see that we can reload this, and we should see another random word. Okay, here we see another random word, and we can do the same thing. So the only thing that's left to do is to have the logic that's going to tell the user whether they got it right or not. So let's go ahead and do that right now. And the way we're going to do it is if you click on swipeable stack and you click here, this actions, open this up, you're going to see there's so many events that the swipeable stack is sending your way. And that makes sense because, you know, you can swipe left on it, swipe right, you can up swipe, down swipe, or just any kind of swipe. Now, when it comes to dating apps and stuff like Tinder, you have left swipe and right swipe mainly. You have those two main events. But for this app, I'm only going to be working on right swipe, okay? Because the idea is if they do left swipe, okay, it doesn't really matter. But if they do a right swipe, that means they're saying that the word that they're seeing is the same word in a foreign language that they're seeing on top. And that is where we need to tell the user whether they're right or not. So that is why I'm going to be focusing only on the right swipe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a conditional action, okay? Because when they swipe right, we need to compare the words and to make sure that, you know, they're actually the same word. And so the first thing that we need to do is we need to pull that random word, okay? We have that random word display, but we need to recreate it, okay? Because we don't have access to that, you know, that text field over there. Well, thankfully, we have this action inputs. We have this random number. So with the random number, we can get the word from the list, right? So the way you do it is you're going to click on this condition right here. You're going to click here, conditions, single condition. So we need to ask the system, are the words equal? Okay, are they the same document? So for the first value, we are going to pick the word that's supposed to be random, that word on top. Right, that word that's high. So we're going to come here. We're going to pick our words. We're going to say item at index, specific index, action outputs. Remember, we have this random number that's available across the entire app. Very, very useful. Now, once we pick the list item at index, we do not want to return the word as a document. We want to return the actual string. And remember, a document has a bunch of fields with different translations, okay? So we are going to be comparing the English translation to the English translation. That way we can see right away if they're equal. So if we click here, we don't want this, we don't want the whole document, right? What we need is this available options, and we want to do get document property, and we want to select the English version. You can do Spanish to Spanish, French to French. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. I just picked English. The next thing that you want to do is you want to compare if that word, that random word, is really the same word that the user swiped on. So you're going to come to equal to, and here you're going to scroll down. You're going to pick swipeable card current element, because this is the card that the user swiped, which resulted in this whole action being triggered. This is the most important thing. We're going to pick this, document properties, and we're going to pick English as well. Confirm. Okay, so now it's checking whether, that value that's being displayed, that word that's being displayed, that random word, is the same that the users just swiped on or swiped right on. If it's true, if it's the same word, we're going to say congratulations. We're going to do maybe a snack bar, something simple. If it's false, we're going to do a snack bar. We're going to say, okay. And that's it. We're going to close this. We're going to reload our app. We still have the test environment. And now let's see if it works. All right, so here's the app. And as you can see, the word that was picked at random is manzana. And you need to decide if this word is the same as this word right here. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. And I'm going to say yes, because this is the same word. I'm going to say yes. And we see correct. Now you can reload this and play it again. Now I've just reloaded it. And now we're seeing a different word here. Okay, so I can say yes. Wrong. Maybe it's this one. Okay, it's not this one. It's not this. It's not this. Okay, maybe it's this one. I think it's this one. And obviously you can customize this app. You can change the language. Maybe you want to see a Portuguese version of the word, or a French, or another language. You can do that as well. You can add some other customizations. And the point of showing you guys this app is just to give you an idea what kind of apps that you can build with FlutterFlow. And granted, this is on the simpler side, right? You can build a lot more complex apps. You can have an app with tons and tons of different widgets doing all kinds of things. So it's really up to you how far you want to take it, how complex you want to build it, or how simple you want to build it. The choice is really yours. Now, if you are interested in really mastering FlutterFlow, really learning it and understanding it at a deeper level in order to build the kind of apps that you really want to build, whether that's to clone an existing app or build a brand new app that nobody has built before, you really want to check out my training called Mastering FlutterFlow. Mastering FlutterFlow is my comprehensive training that takes you from A to Z when it comes to building apps with FlutterFlow. And along with high quality video training modules, you'll also get access to a support area within the community where you can ask questions and get clarifications to various things you're not sure about. Plus, you'll also get access to our exclusive Discord server where you can discuss various things with the community, as well as get help with various things that you're struggling with. So if you want to master FlutterFlow and build the apps of your dreams, definitely check out my training, which you're going to see in the link below this video. I look very much forward to seeing you in our Mastering FlutterFlow community. Now, if you guys want to see more videos where I show you how to use FlutterFlow and some of the functionality, check out the video you are seeing in the corner of your screen. That video is going to show you some amazing tips and tricks when it comes to using FlutterFlow.